Well, good evening. It's great to see you, Johnny, and welcome to the Gordon Center for Performing Arts. You've been here before
Great to be back.
at the Rosenblum JCC here in Owings Mills, Maryland. We're really honored to have you here and have a conversation with you about what's happening in our society and what's happening in our community. But just want to say, first of all, grateful to your leadership, especially since 2018. You know, from the very beginning, you've been just so accessible and available and committed to all of us. And I'm just really honored. Thank you for all the support that you provide the JCC and our growing arts platform and our commitment to really providing diverse arts enrichment to the community. But and your commitment to education as a school teacher. I just really enjoy watching your leadership, and honored to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Barak, and thank you for your leadership here at the JCC. The last time I was here, I was actually with my daughter. We were watching the Snow Queen, not too many rows back here. And, thank you for your commitment to the arts. And we are honored to have, the JCC here. And what a gem for Baltimore County, for the greater community, that, you're not only providing the arts, even in, the virtual programming the JCC is providing, the outdoor movies, the learning centers. I mean, these have been incredibly interesting, challenging, difficult months, not just because of COVID, but because of what we're seeing across this country. But we're grateful that we have such great partners in Baltimore County.
Thank you.
But for the JCC and conversations like the one tonight, we wouldn't be driving the progress that we're seeing. So, my hat tip to you and your incredible team here at the JCC for all that you do.
Well, I'm grateful always for partnership and collaboration, and I think that's what's going to be the right recipe to get us through these times.
Yeah.
But as leaders, right, one of our most important responsibilities is to bring hope. And the last 7 months, the COVID and the pandemic has been just a really, really painful time for everyone, affecting us health-wise, financially, our community, our small businesses. And then layering on top of it, racism, which has been part of our society way pre-COVID. But the events of this past 7 months and the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, it just makes me realize that, just because of the COVID situation, we can't take that issue and just sweep it under the rug and say we don't have time for that right now.
Yeah.
We as leaders have to navigate so many challenges right now. And, I was wondering from your vantage point, with everything going on, and this really painful systemic racism. Look, and there's rising anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
There's xenophobia. There's homophobia. And from your vantage point, as the county executive, how is the county looking to, advance our work in DEI and being, diverse and ensuring equity and inclusion across our community? I know it's something that's very personal and passionate for you.
Yeah.
So what's some of the work that's going on at the county these days?
I'd start by just taking a step back, right? And for me, it's acknowledging our own perspective in all this. And I have this interesting perspective as county executive, where I have this 360-degree view of how, whether it's COVID or coming to terms with institutional racism and seeing the rise of xenophobia and other just forms of hate in this country, in this world. I've seen it all. I mean, I've had conversations during COVID with next of kin, people who've lost families. We've been on hospital calls as we worry about surge. I've talked to business owners who spent their entire lives building something and they're afraid. Parents who don't know what they're going to do for child support or how they're going to take care of their kids. People who have lost their jobs or are worried about being evicted. And we see how all these things intersect. And you layer over top of all of that these conversations about race and these conversations about how we interact. It almost takes me back to my own upbringing. And on the campaign trail, it seems like forever ago, I would tell the story of being a kid who grew up in eastern Baltimore County in the shadow of a steel mill and really growing up in a blue-collar, working-class family that didn't really know how good or bad we had it, but just the struggles of, coming up and coming through, being a first-generation college student, going back and becoming a teacher, and wanting every single person to have the opportunities I had. How lucky am I that I got to come out of that community, become a teacher, become a legislator, eventually become county executive. And what I now get to realize, because I've spent time in protests and I've spent time in conversations like these, is that for as hard as it was for me to get where I am, I had it so much easier than so many other people. I haven't had to deal with xenophobia. I haven't had to deal with racism. I had so many inherent benefits in my own life that I didn't even recognize. And I think those are the kinds of conversations
Awesome.
and coming to terms with where we are. And I wanted to just share that as sort of setting the frame of what we're trying to do in Baltimore County, because we have a long way to go. We have a history that is not all great. I mean, I'm proud of what we're doing in Baltimore County. I'm proud that in our first budget, we hired the first ever diversity and inclusion officer. I'm proud that we finally ended source of income housing discrimination in Baltimore County. I'm proud that we're on the precipice of passing bipartisan police reform in Baltimore County, where we ban chokeholds and prevent people who have use of force violations from transferring in or being hired. And those are important, hard-fought gains, but when we think about things like racism and race issues, I know that one piece of legislation isn't going to undo 400 years of a legacy of race and racism, right, when slavery first came to our shores. And so keeping that in context as we go about our work is really important.
I appreciate hearing about your own upbringing. For me, I grew up in New York, and I did experience anti-Semitism, and I was told to stay out of certain neighborhoods. And I think how critically it's important to bring children together, and so children can see each other for who they really are, be it their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, to feel comfortable within themselves. And that's why, for me at the JCC, I don't ever forget our history. I'm always really proud, Johnny, we're the oldest JCCs in North America. I don't know if you know that. We started in 1854 when the Jews came into the Inner Harbor as a minority group. And we had to build JCCs because no one let us in.
Yep.
We had to build our own infrastructure because, as a minority group, we had to support each other. We had to create our own funds to have money to provide help for the needy because we weren't able to tap other funds. And today, 160 plus years later, it's so important to the board of this JCC and to my leadership and our team to make sure that this platform is unequivocally welcoming to everyone. I always, I say to the team here often, Johnny, that we can think of ourselves as, communal professionals, and we can think of ourselves as bridge builders. And the more that we can welcome diversity in, maybe we can be a microcosm at the J for what's right for the society. And it's not just the JCC, it's the YMCAs that I stand, I believe so deeply in, and community organizations like this that really have an opportunity to really embrace diversity, celebrate it, but also educate when it's wrong, and when people are not saying the right things. So I'm honored at the J now that we keep on advancing our own thinking about how to use this platform and our values that are inspired in Jewish values to welcome the stranger. But it can't just be words anymore. It has to be actions, and we have to demonstrate it every day.
But that's a testament to you and your team that, how easy would it be to continue down that mission of recognizing there was a legacy of exclusion, to say we're going to keep serving those in our community who were excluded. I mean, that is very mature. It's a very mature place to grow to be able to say, because of what we experienced, we don't want others to experience that. And the best way to do that is to have that inclusion and that diversity. And that is true, I think, in every aspect of life. We recognize that truth in Baltimore County in trying to be more intentional about that. Because if we're making decisions and there's not a diversity of race and religion and geography and experience and thought and background, we're missing something. And so if we're not thinking about everything we do through the lens of equity, and we've intentionally put equity as a driving force, not just in what we say, but it's in our strategic plan. We're building it into our budget processes because we know that that makes a difference, and that there have been groups that have been excluded for so long that we have to be intentional about bridging those gaps in terms of how we serve, whether it's differentiated resources in our school systems, or if it's providing funding to groups who are doing that work, that outreach, that connectivity, whether it's our own leadership team. I mean, it's 2020, and when I hired Stacy Rogers as our county administrative officer, she's the first black woman to ever hold that role. She's the second woman in our county's history. I'm very proud. I think we probably have one of the few all-female public safety teams in all of the country. I mean, our
And
fire
a female
chief,
police chief.
our police chief, our fire chief, our Department of Corrections director, our 911 center director, all women. And I think that sends a powerful message to the people we represent. I mean, I think about my 4-year-old daughter, and it's like she can look up and say, I can be a police chief. Right. I can run a county. I can be anything I want because they see that in themselves. And so being intentional about having that diverse workforce and team, it makes your decisions better. It's a better reflection of who we are. And it shows the people we serve that your government reflects who you are. And we're trying to now have that become embedded, not just in our leadership teams, but in our entire workforce. So that when someone shows up, and this is sort of, I think, when a police officer shows up, you have someone who can not just look like the community they serve, but speak to the experiences. Like, I grew up in this community, or I went to that high school, and I can relate to what you're going through, and have more deep, authentic relationship so that we can get to these hard conversations about, you know, what's going on with anti-Semitism, what's going on with racial injustice, and creating that space for those conversations. Because if we don't have that relationship, we don't have that space, we're not going to have any progress.
You know, the one value that I keep on, you know, I feel from you is empathy and really understanding how to be authentic right now. Because we could say all these things as executives and leaders, but the ability to really introspect and look at my own team, and does it really represent the diversity of our county? Does our leadership really represent, you know, and for me, we've had to work at that at the JCC, right? To make sure that not all of our employees are Caucasian, that we're representing the breadth of our community, that women are moving up in our organization. Because we could say these things. It's a difference to put them into action, as we know, and to make sure that we really, you know, that we're really allowing our staff and our membership and our community residents to feel that they really belong. You know, we're doing some work here at the JCC on our DEI work. Our board has formed a task force. Our staff has formed a task force. And we had a woman speaker named Alana Kaufman talk about the difference between feeling welcomed and feeling like you really belong. And I found that when she said it to be really powerful, Johnny. Like, it's one thing to say you welcomed here.
Sure.
How do I make sure you really feel you belong? And so as you advance the work in the county and you think, how can organizations like the JCC and other partners in the community maybe advance this work? I mean, I know we have so much going on and we're doing it in different spaces, but I think about how important it is for us to think about this together. I'm really proud of Baltimore County. You know, we talked just before this started about we're sending, you know, our kids to public schools.
Yeah.
Owings Mills, where this JCC is such a diverse community. And I love it. It's mosaic of life here.
Yeah.
So how can we help, you know, the J or other organizations advance the work?
I mean, I think it's a continuation of what you're doing, right? It's having conversations like this. It's engaging members of the J just by virtue of the programs you offer and having that diversity of experience and thought and background, but then also pushing ourselves and those we represent, those we work with, into these uncomfortable spaces sometimes to really force us to challenge what has always been. You know, I will tell you that the first year plus, and this is before COVID hit and changed our lives culture change has been very hard in Baltimore County government. And having people understand why it's important and bringing them to the table. But I think the JCC and organizations like it play an incredible role in facilitating those conversations and bringing people to the table. And we had one of our town halls here where
It was awesome.
It was awesome because we opened up. We were transparent about what we were facing in this county and what was possible and what was a challenge. And there were hundreds of people here, and they told us what they wanted to see, and they challenged me on things I did or didn't do. They asked questions of our leadership team, and by the end of it, it was like we're better for it. I know that I leave those conversations feeling like I've learned something. I hope that the people we represent leave those conversations feeling like A, they were heard, but B, maybe they learned something. And in that space is where we're able, to move forward. And sometimes, and I've seen this in my interactions with the county council, sometimes we're going to be able to find compromise and consensus. And we're going to be able to move forward like we are with the Smart Policing Act on police reform. Sometimes we're not. But we have to recognize that we all have a shared humanity, and that empathy really is important, because even if I can't get you to agree with my position on this particular issue, there are so many other issues that unite us and that we can come together on. And I think that that's what we're seeing in this country, unfortunately, is that people retreat to their corners, and that's the end of the conversation, as opposed to leaning into what we share, right? And saying, you know what, I don't agree here, but I respect you as a person. I value you as a person. I affirm you as a person. And let's go to this next issue and see where we can make progress together. And it makes politics and governance hard to watch outside of Baltimore County. But it makes me so grateful that we live here. It makes me grateful that we have the partners that we have. And even though we have a lot of things that we need to do better, we can acknowledge the things we've done poorly and still drive towards it. So, I mean, we're on the heels of what I would not call a debate last night.
It was painful.
But think about how different this is, and how you can have conversations not just with me, but probably with every single member of the council. It's a 4-3 Democrat, Republican, and I bet you every single one would sit here and have hard conversations with you about inclusionary housing, zoning, police reform, housing discrimination, educational equity. And you might have different conversations, and you might have different perspectives, but I bet there'd be an awful lot of common ground too.
Yeah, what was hard last night, just in general, is that people weren't hearing each other. And if we're really going to try to create equitable communities, we got to be able to listen to each other and hear each other. And sometimes just be able to say, Johnny, I have to apologize. I'm not in agreement with that. Help me to better understand your position. But too often we're running to our own position, right? Sometimes I can see when I'm being challenged, they're not really listening to me. They're just waiting to, for me to breathe so they can jump right in.
Right.
And I have to say to people, just give me a moment. Just hear me. I'm going to listen to you too. And I think that asking people and leading with questions versus telling people they're wrong for their opinion. I mean, I watch social media, people attacking each other all day versus wanting to take the extra time, which takes time.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting at times. To help me to understand your story. Why do you feel that way? And what I love about the hallways of the J is that people have stories here. Republican, Democrat, Independent. They're from the former Soviet Union, Chinese members. I love it because I always want to know, help me understand your story, because if you understand people's story, then you might find a thread of opportunity to help change their perspective. Yeah. But if you don't take time to really get to know people, which takes time, and sometimes we're all moving so quickly, and we got to get to the next appointment versus the extra minutes to say, help me understand. Why do you feel that way? Because you might have a story.
Well, and what the J does so well is asks the stories, but also does it being intentional about having different stories. So people aren't hearing the same story here because you're so intentional about being inclusive. And the only way that we stretch ourselves as a people is that we hear different stories and different perspectives that makes us think differently about the world. And I can tell you that, I mean, I'm obviously not perfect. We're imperfect people, but our decision making is so much better when we take the time to engage the community, to bring our staff together, to ask questions of each other, to push and say, why do you think this way? Why is this the best result? What are the alternatives? What do other people do? And in doing that, we end up in such a better place. And to your point, it takes more time, it takes more effort, it takes more energy.
More meetings.
More meetings. It's exhausting. But on the other side of it, people can say they cared about what I had to say. Maybe I didn't get what I wanted, but I was a part of that process.
This can't be, the issues that we're talking about now to make a healthy society for our kids. And I think our kids expect it, us to work through these challenges is, to lead with the empathy, but to really allow people to get to know each other in a safe and inclusive way. So with everything that you're working towards here, what's keeping you up at night? What,
So many things, but what keeps me up at night is the bread and butter. It's the, how am I going to care for my kids? I have to go to work and my kids are learning virtually.
Yeah.
What does childcare look like? Or my job is tenuous because of where the economy is in the age of COVID. Where is my next paycheck going to come from, and how am I going to avoid getting evicted? How am I going to feed my family? Baltimore County is not, or was not, in the food distribution business, but since the pandemic hit, with incredible nonprofit partners and the school system, we have delivered over 6 million meals in the last several months.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable because it speaks to the need that's out there. And we're seeing people who were never food insecure before, who are now saying, please, help. And they're thanking us for the help, but I mean, that's what government's supposed to do, is be there and meet the need, whether it's eviction prevention, food distribution, PPE, testing, contact tracing. And we've done a really great job because of our team in standing those things up. But I mean, I'm blessed that I don't have those same concerns that so many people I've talked to are facing about paying the bills, having a job, caring for, having childcare. Because I can put myself in that situation and it's like, but for the grace of God, go we, and it's like, it wouldn't be much before we're in that situation too. And that's what keeps me up at night. I wanted to just say to your earlier point about, young people in particular, as we've been at protests in Randallstown and Turner Station and Towson and Catonsville. I mean, our young people are demanding that they be heard and they be part of the process. And as a former government teacher, I love it. I love that they are demanding that we do things differently and that we do them more inclusively and intentionally and interpersonally. It's fun to see a generation that's supposedly tied to the hip to their electronic devices now rising.
And they're so educated. They
Yeah.
know more than we knew at 8, 9, 10 years old. It's all over the Instagram. It's all over the social media, good and bad. But they're a lot more educated and they're aware. I wonder in your role, with all the tension that is going on, and maybe it is your empathic personality, but you can go to a rally and you have to support our local police,
Yep.
who I stand by. I think Chief Melissa Hyatt is an outstanding leader, Captain Buckingham at our precinct here in Owings Mills. We've had an incredible relationship with the police here in Owings Mills and in the city at our other campus. But I always, there's bad eggs in every group. I mean, there's bad politicians, there's bad policemen, there's bad teachers, there's bad religious leaders, and we need to hold people accountable. And I think, in your role, sometimes there must be a lot of pressure on both sides, and I just wonder how you navigate that.
You do it responsibly, and you listen to everyone. I mean, Melissa, I am so proud of Melissa as well. She's our first female police chief in the county's history, not just part of the leadership team, first ever in our county's history, first Jewish police chief in our county's history, and she's just a great police officer and leader for that department. She understands that we can't do things the way we've always done them, but she also understands that policing is hard, and that not that there are so many good officers in our department, and so even as we talk about things like police reform, we can say we hope that our officers see this for what it is. It's an attempt to make a really good police department even better. My brother, I think a lot of folks may not know, my brother actually is in the Baltimore County Police Department. I joke with him. I say, "I'm your boss. Don't forget that." But I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of him, and he does incredible work, and he loves what he does, and he is a fierce defender for our communities. And it's just like any profession. I was a teacher. Most of our teachers are amazing.
Phenomenal.
Incredible teachers. There are a few that shouldn't be teachers in our school system. And that's true of any county, any city across the country. And so it's how do we have responsible conversations with advocates, with police officers, with police leaders, with those who interact and represent them, to say our communities are asking for transparency and accountability. How can we do that responsibly while acknowledging that you all have a very difficult job, and that by and large the vast majority of officers are good officers and do great work? And I think the answer to the question is you just can't be afraid of having the conversation. I think what happens is so many people assume that if you wade into it, you have to just sort of absolutely be at one end of the spectrum. And you have to, I think, as a leader, and I think COVID and the racial inequities that we're seeing, I mean, times of crisis, more than ever, demands leadership. And it demands people stepping forward to really fill that void and to say, you know what, we got to bring these interested parties together that on the surface have completely different viewpoints of the world. And that's what we did with police reform. With the Smart Police Act in Baltimore County, which is, I think, before the council, they just had their work session and the vote's coming up. We have 6 of our 7 council members. We are a 4-3 Democratic Republican, like it's almost evenly divided. We have almost all 7 council members prepared to vote for police reform. We have our FOP, who represents police officers.
What's FOP stand for?
Fraternal Order of Police. So the union that represents our police officers support the legislation. Our state's attorney, Scott Schellenberger, supports the legislation. Bringing all of these different groups to the table is hard. And there are advocates for reform who think it should go further. And I respect that too. But getting to where we are and actually doing things like banning chokeholds and preventing people and solidifying some of the reforms that we announced about transparency. We just released a dashboard last week. That's an accomplishment, but it took to our prior, it takes time, it takes conversation, it takes intentionality, and it takes listening.
Johnny, what I really appreciate, I'm a social group worker. That's what my degree is in, social work, is bringing people together. And at times that we're going through, which are really challenging, it can make you just want to hunker down and just stay in your own little zone. But I think as leaders, I feel like this time is not about conventional thinking, it's about creative thinking. Yep. And you can only do your best creativity when you bring people together that have differing opinions. And I think you're the type of leader who's willing to be challenged. It's probably challenged by your team. I hope you're willing to be challenged by your wife.
She's my biggest challenger. Honey, I love you. You are amazing. Thank you for all you do to challenge me and grow me. But yeah.
Yeah, but people support what they help create if you take them through the process, right? Dealing with police reform, educational reform, the issues facing our seniors and social isolation are not done in a 60-minute meeting between 2 to 3 that was in our Outlook appointment. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. And when we try to solve things in an hour meeting, it's not going to work, especially on these types of issues that are really deep and can bring back a lot of pain points for people. So I just really applaud that your ability to think openly about when we have to tackle these issues, who are we bringing around the table?
Yeah.
And if they're all going to say, sure, no problem, that's not who we should have around the table. And making sure, because I do really believe that I just said that people support what they help create, but what they help create might take a while.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of your team members are here. I know there are some team members in my office are out there. And I think that if you ask them, they would say, yeah, boss, like sometimes you're wrong.
Yep.
And I hope that they feel like they have the space to push me and others on the team to share that, because we are better for that. And they are the ones. They are the ones that will go out there and spend the hours upon hours upon hours of engaging with the community. I love you all. I'm going to embarrass. So we're in District 2. I'm going to embarrass Michelle Bernstein, who's our District 2 outreach coordinator. But she just spends hours upon hours meeting with community associations, talking about their concerns, addressing their challenges, and that's the kind of groundwork and follow-up it takes. I don't know if it's COVID or the hours. I'm a lot more gray than I was when I
I've
was
noticed
sworn
that
in.
too, I know.
But it's so worth it, because this job is a blessing. This opportunity is a blessing. And I don't ever want to look back on 4 years or 8 years to know that we do it all. We do everything from potholes to poverty. And we have a real opportunity to make a difference for people. And whether it's a kid who grew up in a steel mill town, or a kid who grew up in New York, and wherever, everything in between, right? Whatever challenges and hurdles you had, we have an opportunity to fill those gaps, to provide those opportunities for success. But we don't do it without intentionality, diligence, and an incredible team. I'm so grateful for them, because they do such great work.
I think I'm inspired by all that always, because it's an honor to serve community. I don't know if you know this, I'm a preacher's kid. So I grew up, volunteers at my house every day, dealing with issues of the community. And I always just really think it's an honor to serve community. Mm-hmm. And they trust us with it, and so we don't own this, right? We're here and given a certain time and legacy to make a difference in people's lives. And fundamentally, people ask me what I do for a living. I try to make a difference in people's lives. Now, granted, how I do it is by trying to lead this organization, but fundamentally, we want to enhance people's quality of life every day. And to feel good about themselves. People have real issues. They have struggles. And by the way, it's people that are even on the higher socioeconomic status, they have issues. Their kids have issues. They struggle. And to make sure that we can take the time to really hear people, empathize, maybe even apologize. Mm-hmm. But we also have to respond. By the way, that's an acronym for HEAR. Hear, right? Empathize, apologize, and respond. But we need to ensure that be it the JCC members, the larger community, our constituents across the county, whoever we can work with, that we listen with accountability. Yep. And that's the thing that I, all the time I have to remember. We can listen, and someone could say you're a good listener, but did you do something with it? Mm-hmm. And when people are really hurting on the issues that are facing our society today, mm-hmm. And everything now is heightened, what message of hope would you want to bring to the county and at this time? Because fundamentally, it could be a really scary time. But I wear a bracelet. I don't know if I didn't show you this before, but I wore a bracelet that started at the beginning of this. It says, "This too shall pass." Because I have to remember, as I guide people and try to guide this organization, that these times, as painful as they are, and this is that we've been through these, and it will pass, and we'll get through it. But the systemic racism stuff, it's not going to pass easily unless we really make a commitment to wanting to hear people, bringing people together, looking where there's injustice. And I thought earlier about what you were talking about, the police, is ensuring that people across all companies, workspaces, the county, neighborhoods, you see something that doesn't feel right, say something, right? We have these whistleblower policies that I'm sure you have them, we have them, but people really feeling safe that they can say something, because some issues will pass. We will get beyond COVID, right? There will be a vaccine hopefully sooner than later, and we'll get people out of hospitals, and we'll get people, hopefully, our economy back. But I think these issues of racism and xenophobia takes real internal commitment from leaders of their companies, principals of the schools, to ensure that if they see something or hear something, that they're accountable listeners.
A lot there, but I agree. And I guess the best example of hope I can give to you and to anyone listening is this. So I'll lean back into my years in the classroom. There was a student who I took a great interest in, and I spent a lot of time with this young man because I knew there was something special about him that was just waiting to blossom and be successful. So we spent a lot of time mentoring, giving guidance, giving feedback, answering questions, doing support academically, and he got through high school. He got through high school when I was a teacher, but nothing clicked, and I just sort of felt hopeless because I had invested so much of myself in this young man, so much, and I was just like, you made it through, but like you didn't realize your full potential. And it wasn't until maybe almost 10 years later, I randomly saw him at a restaurant, and he came up to me and he said, "Mr. O, I want to thank you." And I was like, "Hey, like, it's so good to see you. How are you?" He's like, "I couldn't be better. I left high school, I joined a union, I learned a trade, I found the love of my life, we bought a house, my life is like on track."
A lot to be grateful for.
And it was, thank you for what you did to encourage and uplift me then. And it wasn't just me. I know that there had to be so many other things in this young man's life, but like the fact that he circled back, it's sort of that like plant the seed moment where all that work and all that energy and all that time in the moment felt like it was like, I did it for nothing, right? This kid has so much potential and it's not realized. When in fact, it was realized. It just wasn't in that moment. And so I think there's a lesson there for what the times that we're facing now is that, being leaders who are trying to address these issues, you might not see it right away. And even the gains that we see aren't going to solve all of the things that have been around for decades and decades. But the work matters, and it matters on both an individual level and a community level. So,
well, first of all, I love that story because we make such investment in children, in people, in families. We might never always hear in the moment the outcome of that work.
Yep.
But I like to take a telescope and project it out 20, 30 years. And people say to me, well, how are you going to deal with combating anti-Semitism and rights? I go, just bringing people authentically together.
Yep.
So I hope that, anybody of color at the J, they'll be a kid on our basketball court. And 30 years from now, they're a professional in Chicago. And so someone says something about a Jew. They're like, what do you mean? I grew up at the JCC playing ball. Like, I never had a problem. Jews were more than fine. In the same way, the Jews being like, I'm very comfortable with people of color.
Yep.
And today, I'm very, very proud to say that on national statistics, 11% of the national Jewish community are people of color. What a statement of the Jewish community today.
Yep.
And people don't even realize that.
Yep.
And so if we can continue to create places where people authentically can be themselves, see each other, I'm sure we're going to have many stories 30 years from today, thanking you for the investment you made, and hopefully for creating platforms like community centers, the YMCAs, our schools, to make sure that we do create equity in the community. I'm so proud of the work you're doing for women. That's an important statement. I'm proud of the work we're doing here at the JCC, but there's no pedal off the metal.
Nope.
You know,
Full speed ahead.
It's full speed because the work is so important, because fundamentally our programs that you put into place and the programs we put into place, they're tactics. They're tactics for something larger, which is about creating a really great place for people to feel comfortable. And I know that that's what we want Baltimore County to be. That's what we want our towns and neighborhoods to be. But you know, we have to feel comfortable with the other. Yeah. And I'm really proud of our diverse neighborhoods. And I think that overall, I think that we just have to continue to stay the course, stay focused and embracing each other, caring for our neighbors, caring for our friends, caring for our elderly, caring for the poor. And I just want to let you know, we're here and ready to commit ourselves to supporting and advancing the work. I'm really grateful for the time that you came to have a conversation with me tonight. Yeah. I could sit here and talk to you about lots of things, but I know just you have really put yourself out there. And I think I said this at the town hall in February. I gave you a AAA rating, you know, for being accessible, available, and authentic. And that's what we need right now. Yeah. We need to be humble too. We don't have all the answers. I have a lot of questions though. And I think if we can lead with questions and not always feel the pressure to have an answer. Yeah. And say to people, what do you think we should do? Yeah. How should we advance? Yeah. How do I know people feel welcome and they really belong unless they ask them? Mm-hmm. You know, just because you do it in marketing doesn't mean it's really behind it. You have to talk to people. That's right. And so I really enjoy talking to you, though.
Barak, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you again for the great work that you do here at the JCC. Thanks to your awesome team. We're so lucky to have the partnership and all that you provide, because, you know, government doesn't and shouldn't do it alone. I mean, it requires the nonprofit world, it requires the private sector, it requires citizens, it requires the government all coming together. The challenges that are in front of us are enormous, and the only way we're going to meet them is together. But whether it's COVID or any of the other issues that are out there, we can meet the challenge, we can meet the moment, and we can succeed. So.
And I believe that wholeheartedly with you, and unequivocally, that partnerships and really tapping into each other, from the private world to the not-for-profit, the education world, just leveraging each other. Yep. But we have to come together and be willing to hear each other. Absolutely. And so hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, this is great.
It's great to have you at the J.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a shake.